How's it going, you guys? So, there's a problem with individualized nutrition. There's a problem with creating your own diet and trying to find what type of diet is best for you. There's a couple problems with this, actually. Now, obviously, I'm not opposed to this idea whatsoever, but I do believe that there should be some common sense principles that we abide by, regardless of whether we are creating our own diet or following a diet guru, a book like the Paleo Diet or the Fruitarian Diet or something like that. Now, as a baseline, I believe the number one rule that most people should abide by, at least in the beginning, is stick to 100% whole foods. As long as you stick to 100% whole foods, unprocessed foods, from there, the possibilities are endless. You could devise a pretty good diet with varying macronutrients and micronutrients and not experience too much ill health as long as you stick to whole foods. Obviously, there's some caveats to that. So first of all, as you get more in tune with how your body responds to different nutritional styles, through years of experimentation like I've gone through, you begin to notice there might be some whole foods that cause you problems, but if you eat processed versions of these foods, they can actually benefit you in some kind of way. So for example, if you are on a carb-based diet and you are an extreme athlete, your body is going to be relying on that dietary carbohydrate in a carb-based, glucose-based athlete, somebody who's not on a ketogenic diet. And so there's a lot of people who cannot eat whole grain rice or brown rice because it's hard to digest, and a lot of people have intolerances to these whole grains. And so in their case, white rice might actually be beneficial because it supplies a direct source of fuel for glycogen, and at the same time it doesn't bog them down with gas, bloating, and other problems. In my case it was psoriasis and other things that brown rice would normally cause. And so for them, the processed rice would actually be beneficial. For me though, so I realize you don't actually need carbs in order to perform at a high level, and so that's why I'm on a ketogenic diet myself. Anyway, rice will supply you with fuel that fruit just might not be able to supply because there are different types of carbohydrates. So that's just one example, and that can apply to many different types of foods, even fruit juice compared to regular fruit. But those are special needs, and that's only as you get more advanced and in tune with what works for you. The other caveat is that there's people out there who devise their entire diet on fruits, okay, fruitarianism or raw veganism. Now, most vegans are opposed to fruitarianism as well. All right, Vegan Gains, for example, and I think Goji Man, I'm not sure, but they're really against that, and I don't blame them. I personally did a fruitarian diet back in my vegan days, which was a while ago, and experienced extreme unhealth, extreme unease. It was really bad. After the first month I felt so clean and light, but then I just started to feel deficient. And I had developed pre-diabetes during that time. It was horrible. Most raw vegans that you'll see on the internet or commenting on the comment section and whatnot are very delusional. They're schizophrenic. They're out of reality. Most of the sick vegans, they're raw vegans. So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna just eat nothing but fruit, all right, that whole as long as you're eating whole foods, you're fine. No, that doesn't work, because these people, their bodies start to deteriorate. They get, I think it's called sarcopenia. Their muscle mass wastes away. It causes so much problems, and it's harming them way more than it's hurting them. So obviously that is an exception to this whole like, oh, as long as it's whole foods, you know. Um, Conversely, devising a diet entirely on lean animal protein is likely to make you sick. You know, and for example, in the carnivore diet community, a lot of people they try the diet, but they're just eating red meat. They're just eating you know, lean cuts of meat like a sirloin or something. And they start to get nauseated and lethargic and all these other problems. Well, that's because the body can't just survive on dietary protein alone. It needs either carbohydrates or fat, especially at a certain point. And generally speaking, even lean animal protein has small amounts of fat on it, but you know, that's what they call rapid starvation. And while there's debate on, you know, some people might be able to eat that way, but typically even they recommend adding butter or some type of fat to your red meat so that you can do better. And so there are people that can survive on nothing but red meat alone, and they look jacked, they look healthy, and they can survive that way for decades. Although I've been really questioning whether that's, I don't know if that's really ideal or healthy, unless you have an autoimmune disorder where that relieves all your symptoms, like most people find. But if you don't need to eat red meat, only red meat, then, you know, if you don't need to avoid all plant foods, then you probably shouldn't. Because I've been noticing there seems to be a lot of carnivore dieters with symptoms of scurvy. Their dental health goes downhill, and even hair. The regression of hairline is also a symptom of vitamin C deficiency. So, and I've been noticing Sparage's hairline, for example, has been getting worse and worse over the years. So is Sean Baker's, and both of their teeth are pretty fucked up, and mine as well. So anyway, those would be exceptions to this whole rule of like, oh, you can just eat, as long as you eat whole foods, you'll be fine. So some people also have food intolerances. Like, for example, whole grains are a big one. That's one that I had a lot of problems with for a long time. Beans and legumes, nuts and seeds as well. Although, a couple months ago, I actually did a high-dose probiotic experiment for 1 week, and it solved all of my problems, and now I can digest beans and plant foods just fine. So, and I feel a lot better now. So you might want to try that if you have trouble with plant foods. But a lot of people do have trouble digesting plant foods. And so to guilt trip them into thinking, oh, you need to eat plant foods is irrelevant. It doesn't make any sense. Because you don't really actually need plant foods to survive for a long time. And for people with digestive problems, those plant foods are doing more harm than good. So, you know, generally speaking, as long as you're not a part of one of those groups, people with food intolerances, people who are doing like extreme fruitarian diets or lean protein only diets, you should be fine. Although I do think it makes sense to try to reach all of the recommended daily intake of vitamins and minerals just to be safe, because through the last year where I did a carnivore diet and I've been doing ketogenic, I actually do seem to notice a benefit from supplementing with the B vitamins and the vitamin C, the things that seem to have been missing from those diets: vitamin B1, folate, and vitamin C. Another thing is eating enough sodium. I notice eating 5 grams of salt a day seems to make me feel a whole lot better. And then caloric restriction can also make you feel pretty crappy. So I think it makes sense to try to eat at least as many calories as you burn. And to get a good, accurate idea of that, it's a good idea to get a Fitbit, because it really opens your eyes. Because if you notice, okay, you know, the day after I burn a ton of calories and I don't eat enough, I feel like crap. Well, then you can kind of link it back. also tracks your sleep as well. And so you can see if there's a direct link between the amount of calories you burn and the amount of sleep you get. Also tracking your resting heart rate gives you a good idea of where your nervous system's at and how your body's recovering from exercise and whatnot. And your general health as well. So, yeah, I mean, generally sticking to whole foods is a great idea, but, you know, paying attention to how you feel, especially after eating certain types of food, like if you eat a large amount of butter in your coffee and then you notice you feel really dizzy for hours afterwards, that might not be the best approach for you. And so, you know, some people are going to feel better if they eat like a higher carbohydrate, higher plant food, Mediterranean style diet with lots of fish and monounsaturated fats, as well as whole grains and beans and things. Other people might notice that they feel better on a paleo diet where all their carbohydrates come from low glycemic load vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, and then low glycemic load fruits like citrus fruits and berries and things like that. And then eating adequate amounts of protein as well. So some of the principles I think everyone should apply, should start with would be, you know, try to get your recommended daily intake of vitamins and minerals. Use chronometer. Track your food. Track your food, because if you're not tracking your food, then this whole finding your own diet thing doesn't make sense. How are you going to know if the diet's working for you if you're not even tracking what you're eating every day? You need to be looking at how much protein you're eating per day, and then how many of these essential nutrient intakes are you reaching every day. It's very important for trying to figure out if the diet's working for you, is tracking the diet itself. And no one fucking tracks their food, even if I nag them over and over again. It's ridiculous. Getting at least 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. Okay, not body weight, but lean mass. I think that that's an exceptional idea. Telling people to eat their body weight in protein is a ridiculous thing to say, because what if somebody's 400 pounds? Why the fuck would they need to eat their body weight in protein if they're 400 pounds, if they're like obese? It makes more sense because we're trying to support lean mass with the protein. And so I think lean mass is a better indicator. And I do think eating at least your lean mass in grams of protein is essential for feeling your best. Obviously, the government's recommendations are normally for a minimum, so you could survive. But a minimum intake is not an optimal intake, and especially if you're an athlete, eating your lean mass and protein makes a huge difference. It's probably one of the biggest differences I've ever noticed in my own feelings of well-being. So I highly recommend that. And then making sure that you get around the same amount of grams in lean mass with whatever fuel source you're using. So this is kind of like a ridiculous rule of thumb, but for those of you who need to try to figure out like how to calculate how much carbs or protein you're eating, just try to equal the amount of grams that you're eating as protein. Now obviously fat is going to have, fat has a lot more calories per gram, so you're going to be getting almost like double the amount of calories from fat. But when you're on a ketogenic diet, metabolism seems to work differently, at least from what I've noticed. Of course, if you believe in calories in versus calories out, it's not going to really register in your head, but you don't really have, this is only for people who are just starting out and are confused. Just try to get equal amounts of protein and then whatever fuel source you're using, whether that's fat or carbs. I mean, really, that's a ridiculous thing for me to say. So that's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. Because some people do better with high fat and high carb. Some people do better with just high fat. Some people do better with high carbohydrates. As long as you're getting healthy sources of these macronutrients, you should be fine. If you're eating carbs, pay attention to the glycemic load. Different people react differently to glycemic load, to different amounts of carbohydrates and different types of carbohydrates. So there's a lot of individualization to be made in all of this. Make sure that you're not getting gas and bloating and symptoms of food intolerances from certain foods. If fiber makes you feel constipated or something, just reduce the dosage for a while. Same thing with plant foods. And if you haven't tried a high dose, high potency probiotic, I highly recommend doing about a week of that, approximately 400 billion live active cultures for about 5 to 7 days, and that should resolve most of your problems with plant foods, and slowly add in. Don't be one of these people who thinks more is better and just adding a ton of plants for each meal. That's a good way to have symptoms of food intolerances. And if you just add like a handful of vegetables to each meal, you're going to be getting the recommended intake of fruits and vegetables for optimum longevity and health outcomes anyway. A lot of people don't realize 9 cups of fruits and vegetables combined per day. I mean, that's the high end, and that's not hard to get. So just a handful or two of fruits and vegetables with every meal is a good way to start until your gut microbiome can adjust to eating larger amounts. So beyond that, the sky's the limit. Just don't do anything stupid, because a lot of people, their big deal is everyone needs a different diet, So, like for me, I feel best on fried chicken and milk chocolate. I feel best on ice cream and candy, Maybe that doesn't work for you, but it works for me, And it's like, even if you can stay thin eating that way, it's probably one of the worst things you can do. And don't expect yourself to be able to be thin for that long, even if you're calorically restricting, because that's devoid of protein. So you can keep your body weight the same, but your ratio of fat to lean mass is probably going to deteriorate pretty fast. You're going to have more fat than muscle. And in regards to even body composition, this whole calories in versus calories out thing there's still caveats to it. Anyway, hopefully that kind of cleared some things up for some people. There's just a lot of people who think, everyone does differently on different diets, So my diet of fried chicken and ice cream, it may not work for you, but it works for me, and I'm perfectly healthy. All right, Tess Holiday, good luck with that. So that's where I want to kind of remove. And then there's these other people who think, as long as you eat whole foods, and they're just eating nothing but butter or nothing but bananas, and it's you probably shouldn't do that. And then there's people who think I'm eating a well-balanced whole foods diet, and they're always gassy and bloated, they have psoriasis and acne, and they're thinking that it has nothing to do with their diet, when in reality, maybe you need to remove dairy, maybe you need to remove beans and seeds, maybe you need to remove whole grains, So there are a lot of things to kind of consider in this regard, but at the same time, saying everyone should remove grains, or everyone should remove plant foods because they're the devil, they're toxic, I think that's kind of ridiculous. Now, joint pain, the relationship to plant foods, now that's an interesting topic that we might dive deeper on later on. So anyways, leave your questions in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. If you disagree with me, go ahead, let me know, debunk my points point by point, and I'll talk to you on the next video.